Hey Daredevil fans, it's Liz Vastola, costume designer of Season 3. Thank you so much for these great questions. I love talking about Daredevil, and I love wearing red eyeshadow while I do it. So let's get into it. So my story with Daredevil actually begins with Jessica Jones. I was hired to costume design the second season of Jessica Jones, which was an unbelievable experience, and I'm so thankful for, and thankful for the third season, and sad there wasn't a fourth. But from that, I was able to develop a good relationship with Marvel, and towards the end of Jessica, I knew that Daredevil was going to be starting up soon, and I knew that there was going to be a new showrunner, Eric Olson, and I also knew that there was going to be a new costume designer hired. So I basically did everything I could to campaign for myself to interview for that position. And I met with Eric a bunch, and I also, of course, talked with Charlie, and the rest is history. I never expected to be working with Marvel, and I'm so thankful that I did and was able to for multiple seasons. It was just such a great experience, and made such a difference in my life and my career. So the process of script to screen for costumes is an intense one. You start on a show like this about 4 to 6 weeks out from filming the first episode, and during that time you're basically laying the groundwork in every way possible. You're hiring your department, you're having budget meetings, you're also having meetings about the general design of the show with showrunners and the other designers, production designer, cinematographer. Then you are also tasked with starting to hone in, making sure everybody's on the same page with what the superhero look, so to speak, will be for the season. And you start to have conversations with the leading cast on, thoughts, ideas, things they want to do different, things they want to keep the same. And then the shopping begins, and you, and the building and the sewing, of course, especially on a show like Daredevil. And you basically establish a closet fitting for each of the main characters who will recur throughout the season, so that everybody is on the same page in terms of essentially how they're going to dress. From there, you're about 2 weeks out, and the crazy starts. The director and writer for the first episode fly in, and you start honing in on what that episode is going to look like. It's meetings upon meetings upon meetings, and a lot of shopping and building and fitting. And, every fitting you have, you publish so that on this online platform so that everybody can approve it. And from there, either you're given the choice to choose what you like, or something might call out to somebody, in charge, and they are like, oh, we really love that, let's go with that. And then, it gets altered and put on camera. And sometimes that process is a few days, and sometimes it's 6 hours, and sometimes it's immediate. And you just have to go with the flow. And then as soon as you start filming the first episode, the director and writer for the second episode fly in, and you start prepping that one. So, any television show of Daredevil size, be it Marvel or not, it's truly miraculous that they make it to the screen, every time. And it's such an incredible amount of work, and it's so invigorating and rewarding and stressful. But at the end of the day, if the cast and the crew are all on the same page and all have mutual respect and love for the material, it's an absolute joy. And I cannot say enough how true that was for Daredevil and Jessica, and I think it really shows on screen. I have a lot of favorite costumes from Daredevil Season 3 for a lot of different reasons, but I think the one that I want to shout out specifically here are the gloves from the vigilante costume towards the end of the season. They were wrapped with rope and tears of black fabric, and everything about those gloves, the making of them, the sort of the look of them, the distress of them, and then their actual performance was, I think, just the pinnacle of productivity and success for our specific costume department. We had an unbelievable member of our department, Miwa Ishii, who sat for many, many hours with yards and yards of rope and tears of black fabric. And I tasked her with, how can we put these gloves together without a sewing machine? Because there's no way Matt had a sewing machine to be able to craft them. And she figured it out. And she figured out a way to do it so that she could teach Charlie. Because it was important to him, of course, and also to Marvel and to Eric and to myself, that everything he wore this season felt organic and felt like it was truly coming and thought of from a place within him, that he felt something about the outfit. He was the creator of it. So, of course, we had different versions of the gloves to make sure they were safe. And ultimately, we decided that the best version for Daredevil would be a glove that was basically already set to go as a glove, like woven together. And then it had like okay, let me start that over. There were a lot of iterations of this glove. For stunt purposes, for filming, for comfort, but the hero version, let's say, the one that Daredevil himself would use and could take out of his pocket and put on in a moment's notice, we decided was a version of the glove that Matt would have woven together himself and then left the bottom strands loose so that when he takes it out of his pocket, he could put it on his hand and then wrap it around his arm and shove the excess back into the glove by his wrist. And it totally worked. And I'm just so proud of it. I think it's really like that, and the mask are the shining moments of that costume, and they tell such a story. They tell the story of Matt's journey. They're beat up and they're bloody and they're organic and they have roots in, Muay Thai boxing, and they tell you how he fights and they tell you how gritty he is and how real he is. And I hope wherever they are, they're being taken care of because those gloves are everything to me. Translating a costume on the page into a costume in real life. So from comic to camera. Wow, I should really write a book from comic to camera. Anyway, that translation is very hard, and there is so much pressure, and it's very stressful, and it's also impossible to do 100% correctly, because the comic is its own work of fine art that exists in a work of literary art, and a costume exists in a world of cinema, and both of those forms of art, let's say, operate on completely different aesthetic principles. That is to say, on a two-dimensional page, requires a different sort of process than in front of the camera and the lights. So the way I suggest going about it is looking at your source material and deciding for yourself what are the most important visual cues that I need to bring with me when I create this into a costume. Is it the color? Is it the silhouette? Is it the detailing? Is it the weaponry or the way it looks like it moves? And also, what is the power of the person wearing it? And then once you kind of single out that list for yourself, you write it down, you put it to the side, you let it soak in, and then you let it go. And you allow yourself a period of creativity where you're answering questions about the costume based on the questions that exist in the film or in the show. So, for example, where did this piece of clothing come from? What does it have to do on the screen? How is it made? What is it made out of? And you might not have all the answers to that. You know, it might be something that Marvel already knows. It might be something that the actor has an opinion on. It certainly is usually something that the writer may have figured out for themselves. And the way you can answer the questions that you don't know the answers to is through the character. You know, what makes the most sense for Matt Murdock to wear? Where is he getting the clothing that he got, you know? And so you kind of allow yourself the separation from the page and think of it as any costume, as you would any costume in any film or television show. And, you know, use your power of a costume designer to do it that way. Then once you have what you feel like might be a good idea or a finished form, or you know, have it on a hanger, whatever whatever point in the process you're in, you look back on the page and you ask yourself, are they related? Are they the same? Does this make sense? Where have I gone too far? Where do I need to reel it back in? And you allow that dialogue, let's say, between the page and the piece of clothing to exist and to inform each other. The nice thing about the way the story was set up for season 3 is that Matt's vigilante outfit could really unfold and evolve as the season went on. So we were learning about it in real time as Matt was learning about it. You know, scripts would change, storylines might go one way or another, and because of the nature of how Matt was building it for himself, we always had that flexibility to respond to the script as needed. And I love how organic it was and how there was sort of a parallel evolution of the costume, not only for myself and for Charlie, but also for Matt. And we were able to, you know, sort of build it as we needed to build it. And so in that way, it took the whole season. But in terms of the beginning genesis of it, the beginning version of the outfit, to land on that took about 6 weeks. The framework for it and the idea of where we wanted to go with it. But we were able to sort of address certain needs or, you know, certain stunt sequences as we went along, which was really nice and which, you know, gave a real true life to the costume. It wasn't sort of established and then dead in a sense. It really lived with us and grew with us. And I think that really was a tremendous add for the story. So visually, there were no differences between Dex's Daredevil suit and Matt's Daredevil suit. That was very important to Eric, of course, because it was a huge story point. It had to be exactly the same. Of course, we made Wilson and his stunt doubles new suits to wear because they were a different fit. But in terms of the form of it and the visuals of it, it was exactly the same. That being said, there were a few secret differences, and the most important one being his gloves. Daredevil's gloves were a riff on a boxing glove. They're very bulky and massive and, kind of stiff. Dex, on the other hand, of course, needs to have maximum mobility and perfect articulation of his wrist and fingers, to be able to throw things and also to be able to fit his fingers into a gun. So we did make some changes there. I think they're minor enough that you probably wouldn't notice them, but actually they had a huge difference in the way that Wilson was able to move his hands in the gloves as opposed to the way Charlie was. So Matt's vigilante mask for season 3 was a really interesting design process. Essentially, there were some versions of it drawn by current Marvel comics that were sent out as guides, but also as just sort of a jumping off point. And what I did was sort of thought about all the things this mask needed to be able to do, and the overarching kind of poetic principles that I wanted to make sure we hit upon in its final form. It's intimidating coming on as the costume designer, knowing that the previous superhero outfit for Daredevil was a very impressive red and black rubber suit made in Los Angeles. And knowing that my version of his suit was going to be, made from rags and found clothes and be, beautifully organic to his story, but had to still pack that same punch. No pun intended. So other than the gloves and his general silhouette, I knew that the mask had to accomplish quite a lot. Not only in how it was made and how it was going to be used by Charlie and his stunt doubles, but also from a story perspective. You were going to see it the most, and it needed to really clue you in to where Matt was at that point. So I started sitting down one night in my office with a head form, like a block that a milliner would use. And I knew that the idea for this mask was going to be, instead of just sort of like one black piece of fabric pulled over his head, which was already done in season 1, I loved the idea of him tearing fabric from what he had, from old church vestments, from whatever would be in the crypt, and making something for himself that he could use. So this idea of like tearing and ripping and bandaging, but also a sort of, crown, if you will, all the sort of like religious iconography that I could pull into it, which of course is so important to Matt Murdock, as well as his pain and his injuries, both physical and psychological. On top of that, the healing that he's going through and the bandaging of it all, and the sort of self-sufficient healing. I loved being able to sort of see how I could problem solve and express all of that. And so we found this incredible stretchy part of the fabric was able to help with the stunt of it all. So we found this incredible stretchy, nubbly, spandexy fabric that had a very cotton matte texture to it. which was perfect because I knew it would be comfortable, be able to wash it easily, and also I could buy that it was something that he'd find in the crypt. And I just started wrapping it in different ways, like wrapping it around this block, this milliner's block, and finally just sort of came to a version of it that I thought was successful. The white fabric that ran towards the bottom of it has a lot of different meanings. I think you can read into it what you like, but I would like to suggest that, of course, there's a huge relationship between that white and black fabric and the white and black fabric you would see on a nun. So I think it recalled his mother in a really beautiful way. It also was a little bit more of a literal bandage motif. It was also aesthetically a perfect, lovely white highlight, so you didn't just lose him in the dark, among a host of other meanings. And I would love to know what it meant to some of you, actually, because I think that it was such a simple graphic move, but it really kind of like individualized him and made it seem like something more special and more of a storytelling piece, let's say, than maybe just a black piece of fabric. I have to apologize, I've completely lost the light because a storm cloud has come over, but I guess it's par for the course, Daredevil, might as well answer these questions at night. But in terms of the way we were able to make the mask usable so that Charlie and Brewster could see out of it, the way that I wrapped it, I left a little sort of like shape in the front because the white went around his nose, and I left this little shape or section of the wrapping that was towards the back of the mask, so closer to his face, that we could switch out with performance micro mesh, which is like a very very strong but mesh, essentially, so perforated, and that you could see through in daylight. So we had a version of the and it was completely undetectable, really. So we had a version of the mask with the micro mesh. We had a hero version of the mask that you could hardly see through. You could sort of see through the nubbly fabric, but like not profoundly. And then, of course, there were times where we just needed to cut holes and hope the camera didn't pick it up and put black over their eyes because they really needed to see. There's nothing at some point you're putting mesh so widely woven over the eye, you might as well take it off. And you have to have that kind of flexibility. But the way the mask was made, it never interfered with the rest of the mask, because it was just this one piece of wrap, right, over the eyes that could be taken out very seamlessly and not disrupt the white over the nose. There's also a foam, a hard foam piece across the nose so that the silhouette is always nicely maintained and so that it's very easy to put on and hopefully always kind of have the white catch at the same spot. Very difficult, especially when you have a character that moves quite a bit, but any little installations that we could put in that would help our cause and keep the integrity of the mask, we did. In terms of a future mask for Daredevil, I would love to see if we could think about a different material for him to use. Is he secure enough in himself and in his super self now? Is he at peace with it enough that he could venture into something a little more hardcore? Is there a way that we could work in the horn imagery and the devil imagery in addition to the nun and the, kind of holy imagery and heaven imagery at the same time in the same mask. I just wonder, I would love to figure that out. I don't think it would look anything like his red mask. I think it would be something where the materials would feel, you would look at it and it would feel scary. It would feel hard and not soft in any way. If that opportunity came up, I would jump at designing that mask in a heartbeat. It was an honor to work on Fisk's iconic white suit. Vincent is obviously incredible. He is a genius at what he does. That character is unbelievable. His interpretation of everything is inspiring, and it was just truly amazing. The hardest thing about Fisk's suit was not necessarily what it would look like, because it seemed very clear the right way to go with it, but actually finding the right fabric. Obviously, it was custom made, and we had many, many, many of them. Of course, that scene in the closet where Fisk is thumbing through all those white suits, those are all real white suits that were made. The fabric was a combination, I believe it was 51% silk, 49% wool, and that gave it just the perfect amount of sheen and the perfect amount of stiffness, so that we always felt his silhouette, but he always felt very rich, and it felt kind of sumptuous on the screen. The color was so hard to come by. Ultimately, we ordered that fabric through a silk wholesaler, and it came from Europe. You can't bleach natural fibers, so you'll never find a completely white suit that doesn't have mostly polyester in it. And of course, we didn't want to go that direction. But we were seeing so many like champagne colors and, beige, and it just felt like such a cop-out. Like, this needs to be white, and it needs to be silk wool. And my unbelievable shopper, Sean McCullough, motorcycle, found it in New York. I mean, we looked at New York, LA, we even had swatches sent from London, but Sean's genius served him. Sean was able to find it in New York, and we were actually like in competition over the fabric with Vera Wang, because it's also a, perfect fabric for them. But we were able to buy most of it out, and oh gosh, when we got that fabric, that was it. I had the best time with Deborah Ann Wall working on Karen for season 3. When we meet her in season 3, she is an investigative reporter. She's on the move. Like, she's in the streets. She needs pants. It just was clear to me from the outset. And, but still, we wanted to maintain Karen's style. So, we started, and Deborah Ann Wall was so generous with her, flexibility and her trust in me to kind of pivot Karen a little bit. And always so informative on, letting me know if something felt a little bit too far or not far enough. It was great. It was such an amazing working relationship. And we started just sort of working in more kind of a more city feel to her, boots, trench coats. And then as the season went on, we just sort of both felt it really felt right to get a little darker, to get a little more gritty with Karen, to sort of shift that part of her closet into feeling like a little bit more like Matt, a little bit more parallel to his journey in terms of her color palette and how she moves and acts, throughout the world. And it seems like it landed with audience members. It seems like people understood it. It was 100% motivated by her job, by her being a woman of the city, that girl's wearing pants and boots and a killer coat and a killer bag and her, that shock of blonde hair and her beautiful eyes, and she's there. I think one of the most challenging tasks, other than everything I have previously mentioned, in terms of the vigilante suit and the Fisk suit, there were a lot of challenging tasks in season 3. But I think one of the most interesting ones that I don't really talk about as much is the iteration of the season 2 red Daredevil suit that Matt has on when he's on the beach at the very beginning of the season. It's a version of the red suit that we had to make look distressed. We had to make it look like it had gone through everything it had gone through. It had been blown out, crushed by concrete. Everything that had happened at the end of the Defenders season, we had to express in that suit. And what it really required was figuring out what that suit was supposed to be made of, and how we were going to make rubber and spandex look like those materials in a static shot. It didn't have the assistance of movement or, super low lighting. You would see it. And, or at least we were expecting you were going to really see it. I think you do see it pretty well, but as I remember. Anyway, so my incredible assistant costume designer, Sabrina Zane, did a ton of visual research on different materials that we thought the suit could be made out of, and what those materials look like in their current form and what they look like when they're burnt. Wire steel mesh or concrete or different organic materials, different things that just look really cool and really hardcore. We also used that gold fabric that you see on the inside of Fisk's suit, that you see being used to make his suit in season 2. So we used bits of that. My incredible breakdown artist, Dylan, did an unbelievable paint job on the suit, and we were able to do really extensive camera tests on what the suit would look like and prep, and it was just lights back. It was challenging because there wasn't really a manual for how to figure it out. But once we did, I was really proud of us. I think it turned out really great. And I think it gave a new sort of life and importance and gravity to that specific suit. And seeing it destroyed like that really told you the state that Matt was in at the start of our season. That's it for me. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. I hope this was interesting. I'm always happy to answer more questions if you have them. You could find me on Instagram. Daredevil, of course, means a lot to me, and it's such a remarkable character. I wish more people knew. And, of course, I don't know anything specific, but I'm sure he'll be revived in the future. And I hope when he does, if it's not my team, whatever team is assigned to him takes as much care of him as we did. And I'm sure they will, because how can you not? All right, well, ciao.